So welcome everybody to Straight Science. This is an evening science series put on by UAF Northwest Campus in Nome and also by UAF Alaska Sea Grant, which is here. You're in the home office right now. And both UAF Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we serve the Bering Strait region, and that is the homeland and waters of the Yupik, Inupiaq, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. Mm-hmm. Tonight, we're really excited. I guess first I'm going to give some caveats before I give an introduction. Know that Nome is having an interesting series of days, and we're in our third day of sustained winds. Mm-hmm. We have lost the internet throughout most of town and Icy View. So we are doing this. If by chance we lose the internet here in Dexter, we will just, you will all be thrown off. I think, Tony, since making you co-host, you will probably be still running with it. So people can have the option of following to the end. I think the recording will be kaput, but we'll see. Oh. And so stay with it if you see that there's some sort of technical glitch, and Tony may be able to pull it out of the fire by himself at his end of things. And also, for those of you who are interested in what's sort of happening, is we're having a sustained high wind event in eastern Norton Sound out of the northeast. And it's very interesting. It's taking the ice right out of the sound. So we've lost a lot of ice, and it's on the move quite well. There's a lot of open water now in eastern Norton Sound and along the north shore of of Norton Sound, the north shore of Norton Sound. So, and it has been really sustained at high speeds, up gusting into the 70s for the last 2 or 3 days in Unalakleet and Shaktoolik area. So with that, so know there may be some techno glitches, and there may be a lot of people. I know there's a lot more people that would like to be on this call, this Zoom call, but cannot be. I do see we have 2 callers, so we will be able to hear you, callers. And I know it is really hard to be a caller on a Zoom call because you cannot see or follow along. You will have priority. If at any time you have a question, you just sing it out, and we will stop and we will listen to the caller. So callers have priority. It is a tenuous link. That usually means people are calling in. They may actually be calling in from Nome tonight, but it may be that some of the outlying communities are trying to call in. So we welcome the callers. We welcome you all. And tonight, what better topic on a stormy night than walruses in the Bering Strait region? And we bring you Tony Fischback, who is a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey Alaska Science Center in Anchorage. And he is no stranger to the Bering Strait region on either side. And he has worked really, I mean, Tony, you can go into it, but I think you sort of cut your teeth really and began in the Bering Strait region with walruses on St. Lawrence Island, and wonderful education that you and I have both received in this region during those days. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Tony, for Counting Walruses, the View from Above. Thank you so much. Pete, and for anyone else who has their video running, since we are having a tough time, I'm going to ask that everyone turn their video off except the speaker. And that might save us all a little bit. All right, with that, thank you so much, Tony. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kay. Thanks for the introduction, too. And so I got involved with walruses starting in 1995. I started my education in Suvukak in St. Lawrence Island. Very, very grateful for all the families who looked after me and saw that I needed some education about walruses. I really, well, I can't say too much about how that's affected my direction in life and where my heart is. So I'm simply very grateful for that education. I'll say that I work at USGS. I'm joined in this talk with 3 of my coworkers, David, Rebecca, and Karen. And I'm also joined with collaborators from the other side of the Bering Straits, Anatoly Kochnev and Irina Krukhanova, who is from Russia, but is she works with North Pacific Wildlife Consulting, and Anatolia is with the Russian Academy of Sciences. Irina has years of experience doing marine mammal surveys, and Anatoly has been studying walruses in Chukotka, I think over 30, maybe over 35 years. I can't go on too much about his experience working with them, staying in remote places for the observations he does. So I'll jump into the talk. This is a talk primarily about new tools we have for understanding walruses that image them from above, either using airborne drones or using spaceborne resources, sensors that are in orbit. So I'll jump right into the talk, and there's an outline to help keep us straight. I'll be covering three main topics. I'll introduce just some walrus biology and geography for those who aren't familiar with the Bering Straits region. And then I'll talk about how we're using drones, airborne little drones, to fly surveys and to actually count the walruses on the beach. And from that, we're able to estimate the regional abundance that are using that haulout. I'm really excited about this because this is a study that has come to fruition, very close to getting it accepted for publication. The next topic will be using satellites to actually monitor the location, the occurrence of walrus haulouts, and understand their size and their location, where they are. Are they here at this corner or over there on the next cape? We can now begin to evaluate whether that can be done using satellite imagery. Something I didn't think would be at all possible just 3 years ago. Now I can show you what we're doing with it. The next topic I'll have in here is how to use drones to fly over walruses so they can't even hear the drone, but that it can take photos well enough. They can be looked at and used to examine the body condition of the walrus. People have effectively done this with seals in Antarctica and now in Nova Scotia. We realize we can do this with walruses. So we'll talk about how we're preparing to have a study that does that. So next slide, I'll start with walrus biology. Unlike other pinnipeds, unlike other seals, ugruk, and all the other seals, walruses have got to get out of the water and rest. This is especially true for the females. The males are capable of spending long times at sea and resting solely on shore, but the females need to rest on a much more frequent basis because they don't have those large bladders that they can extend from their pharynx and fill them with air. The females don't have that ability, so they're not able to rest at sea. This is the geography where walruses come to shore in large numbers to rest. We do have large haulouts that are known in Bristol Bay, famously so in Alaska, and along the Koryak coast and on the western side of the Bering Sea. But the most important haulouts, the ones that have recently become heavily used in the absence of sea ice, which are these ones up and into the Chukchi Sea. And as all of you know, when the sea ice retreats from the Chukchi Sea, walruses need to rest. They come to shore in large numbers. This has been seen in northwestern Alaska, as well as in northern Chukotka in Russia. We're concerned about these large haulouts because unlike the traditional male haulouts in the Bering Sea, there are calves here. And when these walruses are disturbed, walruses can move quickly to the safety of the sea. And in the process, we have seen that large numbers of calves have been crushed in that process. I reported on that at this beach, Icy Cape, in 2008, and it's been observed in northern Chukotka in Russia as well. Sometimes well over 100 animals being killed in stampedes. So this is the reason that we need some way to monitor these haulouts. When are they occurring? Where are they? Can we establish some warning for people so they can stay away to minimize the chance of disturbance? Other reason to be concerned about walruses when they come to shore in large numbers is they're concentrated and they're more susceptible to a spill event from marine traffic. And I believe all of us are aware of the big changes that are happening with marine traffic. This is one of the Yamal Max vessels I've got in this picture. There are 15 of these that can travel through the Bering Straits year-round, delivering liquid natural gas from the Amal fields to the Eastern Asian market. There are other vessels that are transiting through spring ice and even in winter ice. If we look back over the last 4 months, you can get a picture of the level of traffic we're seeing in the Bering Strait region. Here is September. Notice that most of the traffic is on the Russian side along the North Sea route, as well as coastwise vessels that are supplying communities and mining operations in northern Shikoka. This year, unusually, there were actually pollock vessels that appeared in these tracks up in the Russian side of the Chukchi Sea. We are looking in October. You can see that the US traffic just comes almost down to nothing at all, whereas in the Russian side, it's going strong. There are many, many voyages. And many of these voyages are going near shore, close to where walruses are resting. Even in November, when the ice begins to form, we still see lots of traffic in the Chukchi Sea. Into December, plenty of ice there. You can see these have got to be icebreakers by the jaggedy lines of their track up in the Chukchi Sea. And even into January, we have vessel traffic going to the Bering Straits. This is a picture of 7 vessels that were going through the Bering Strait just last week. Thanks to Gay Sheffield for pulling that together. So there are reasons to be concerned about walruses on shore and reasons to monitor them. But there's some bonuses when they're on shore. They're all one place and you can count them better and you can monitor them because they're all bunched together. So there's an opportunity for us to improve our monitoring. In fact, the last 15 years, tens of thousands of walruses hauled out at one place in northwestern Alaska near Point Lake. So that's an opportunity to monitor them there because it's consistent and because it represents all of the walrus. This is where all the walruses in the US side of the Chukchi Sea have gone to rest. They've not gone anywhere else in large numbers like they have. Okay, going forward. Next topic, I'll go into tools that we have to monitor them. So as I mentioned, it's a great opportunity when they come to shore because we can, knowing what the movement patterns are in the Chukchi Sea, we know that if we monitor this one spot here, we'll be monitoring the entire population of animals that are using the US sector of the Chukchi Sea. So if we can count the number of animals here and extend that count, then we'll have an estimate of how many are using US waters in Chukchi Sea. Previously, we put a lot of effort into that because we realized how important it was to do this. We put people in aircraft and we took photos and we counted walrus in the photos. This is very, very difficult to do because you've got to have very high, clear skies. You can't have any clouds anywhere near ground, and that doesn't happen very often. So with lots of effort, we were able to get 3 surveys in 2014. By the time the surveys were completely conducted, many of the walruses were leaving. And we were unable to get a precise estimate because of that. You can see we have a point estimate down here around 150,000 walruses, but the confidence we have in that number is represented by these whiskers. And now you can see there, it's a meaningless whisker. It goes up almost to 2 million. We know there aren't that many. So that it tells us that the tool we developed was just a pioneering tool. It couldn't give us a good estimate. And the main reason was because we couldn't fly enough surveys to have a way to get a tight confidence interval. So the next thought we had is, well, let's look down with something small that can fly underneath the clouds. And then we thought, well, what if I bother walruses? What if they don't like that? So we were able to get permission to test that and find out what altitude is a safe altitude to fly when walruses were offshore on ice where it's safe to approach them. And if they get into the water, it's not a big thing. Once we had done that work, we collaborated with our Russian colleagues over in northern Shikoka at Cape Sirtsakamon with the help of Vladimir Burkhanov and Anatoly Kochnev and a team of biologists working there. they were able to monitor 5 different sites using drones. And they also did controlled experiments in places where there weren't too many walruses to determine what altitude the walruses will tolerate. The answer was around 50 meters. Below 50 meters is some danger they could look up and be disturbed. So we took that, doubled it, and we flew all of our surveys at about 100 meters, close to 350 feet. I threw in some photos of just the process we have to get to do the surveys, to gain access to the land with the help of the local tribal authority, the IRA Council, and the Mayor's Office in North Slope Borough. All helped us learn how to work in the community and get safely to the island close to where the walruses were and establish a camp. The mayor even came out with us to help us give us some tips on how to do this safely. And on occasion, they came out and had to actually break ice for us because the lagoon froze over while we were camped out trying to do our job. So I just put those pictures in there to give a sense of what our field conditions are like. And here's a picture of the drone flying. It's circled here in yellow. You can see a little dot over the water. We like doing the surveys with this. It's much safer, not only for humans, but much safer for walruses. The best thing is for us, you can get more data whenever the weather breaks, the rain stops, the wind lays down. We can get out of our tent, launch this thing, get the survey done, and do it safely. And the data is better too. This is a picture of what the data looks like. These surveys are flown over a mile of beach. These walruses will occupy an entire mile of beach, up to 150 or more yards inland. So much so we had to sometimes stitch together 4 flights with these little drones to cover the area. Once we did, we were able to complete 26 surveys in 2 years, 13 surveys each year in 2018 and 19. And you can see what the surveys look like. Here's a scale bar here. It's about a mile of beach. And we outlined the walruses we can see in that image. The image is taken with about 2 centimeter resolution. Each pixel is about 2 centimeter. Not the best picture of a walrus, but when it's an area that large, it lets us count them. And you can see the method we use for counting. We didn't have enough time in our life to count every one of them. So we put a grid on top of that picture, and then we randomly selected 1 in 10 of those grid cells. And then we worked out a way to put pink dots on each walrus we saw. And we'd go through twice because you'd see some in your eyes with fatigue, you have to come back to that same cell again. Anyway, it took us 3.5 months of sitting there counting like that just to count 10% of the cells, these grid counting cells that we put over our photo. It was a bit of work, and once we were done, we were able to run the numbers, and this was the exciting part. This is the first time we have ever been able to present defensible numbers of the number of walruses that rest on shore near Point Lay at the Haulout there on that beach. And this is really exciting. People before would fly by, take some photos, work through the mind in many ways to figure out what the number was, but it wasn't something that was reproducible and would have a tight confidence bar. So here in the slide, you can see all these little dots, and each dot represents an estimate of how many were on the beach. Now, a little whisker indicates our confidence in that estimate. And you can see how it changes over time. Here's the 2 years. The groups will come up, they'll go down, they'll go off and do their foraging. A lot of times their behavior is synchronized. And you can see there's sort of waves of them coming and going. So this was great. We know there's almost 60,000 walruses resting on that beach. But in order to estimate the number of walruses in the entire region, we needed to have some radio telemetry data. So we are able to place radios on a walrus's back using a small barb that holds onto their skin. And that will stay on the walrus for 2 or 4 weeks. But during that time, it will tell us on an hourly basis whether the walrus was in the water foraging, in the water just traveling, or or if it was out of the water and resting. If it was out of the water and resting during the study period, during the time we're doing the surveys, there was only one place to rest, and that was at the beach where we did the surveys. So by using these tags with an hourly diary that would send back through satellite, we were able to estimate the proportion of walruses that were available to be counted, and then do an analysis to determine how many walruses are in this pink region of the US waters, the Chukchi Sea, during the autumn and open water season into the fall. So you can see our results here. I represented them here with the error bars. The first one is that previous effort using people and aircraft observers. Over here, you can see the relative size of our error bar. Go to the next, there's our surveys, the two surveys, 2018 and 19. There's got an error bar on it too, but it's much, much smaller. Now I'll zoom into those two surveys, and you can see the answer was actually consistent with previous survey and the point estimate, well over 150,000 walruses. And in our surveys, we found well over 160,000 walruses in both study years, and our confidence intervals broadly overlapped. This is some of the tightest confidence intervals ever. This is the tightest confidence interval ever reported for a walrus population estimate. This is just a regional population estimate. But now that we have this methodology worked out, we can collaborate with Russian partners, Northern Chukotka. If they're interested, we can build a team and we can do an estimate for the entire Chukchi Sea during that open water period. That would be a step forward in understanding the total population. Of course, it would not be able to get the males and some of the small number of females that are in the Bering Sea. That would require a different survey effort. But this is, we're very excited that we can see that this is possible. And now I will turn to the next topic, so I don't take the entire evening here. I'll move along to talk about how we're able to use satellite imagery and how that worked out for us. And this part of the talk, it's its own talk outline because there's enough little points in here. So I'll talk about the type of images that we can use. Drink the water first. Thank you. And I'll talk about how we evaluated our interpretation of them. So started with the images. Many people realize that we started doing Earth observing work. USGS 1972, NASA launched the Landsat-1, the first satellite to observe the Earth and report back with optical images that were used for science. And that lineage of Landsat satellites is still flying. There's an image from Landsat 8. On the left-hand side, you can see in red, green, blue color, the brownness. This is just an image just like you would take with your camera. It's just this a natural color image. It's distorted because it's been taken through a lot of atmosphere, and it's very pixely. Very coarse image, but still, if you squint your eyes, you can see the brownness of those walruses. You can see the scale and understand how many walruses are there. It's over 750 yards of walruses, maybe close to 800 yards of walruses on the beach. You can see that in the image. Now, looking over on the right-hand side, I'm showing the same image, a different date, but the same scale image taken with a radar satellite, a satellite that sends out a small pulse of radar, and it bounces back, and it's received and processed into an image. And you can see these pink blobs are revealing the location of the walrus, two walrus groups that are about 750 meters from end to end. So that can be seen day or night whenever that image is taken, whether it's clouds or not. So I'm going to step into the next level where we have images that are being taken by the European Space Agency's 10-meter resolution optical and radar images. It's no question what you're looking at. The optical is so good, you not only see where the walruses are now when that satellite flew over, but you can see where they had been before as well. You can see the scar left by their presence on the beach. And then over here in the radar image, the walruses are absolutely present. You can just see that. Going to a finer scale, there's an optical satellite that flies. There's little ones about the size of a shoebox. These are inexpensive satellites to launch, and they're part of a Planet Labs commercial operation. They're taking images of the entire planet every day in 4-meter resolution. And here's what those walruses look like. Again, it's not as good a quality satellite, so that even though it's high planar resolution, it's not that much better than the European Space Agency's one in terms of what you can see. But you can clearly see where the walruses are, where they had been before on the beach, and it's clear. Over here is a radar image, similar, same about resolution. You can see those walruses also very clearly. Then stepping up to the absolute best, occasionally there are images that are taken at 1-meter resolution from a company called Digital Globe. Searched back through the archives, and we found one good image during our study years, 2018 and 19, and it is stunning. You can almost make out individual walruses in that photo. Each pixel is about 2 feet. So each pixel on that image is about 2 feet in length and width. Same thing. Well, this one's more like 3 feet. This is radar image. Each pixel is about 3 feet. And there, the walrus is very clearly seen. So it's nice to see some good images, but we wanted to know how consistent this was. So we evaluated hundreds of images that were archived from previous collections. And then we tasked some of the better images in radar to better understand what it could do. So we then had to evaluate the consistency. We had 3 observers who had looked at walrus haulouts for surveys in the past, and they each drew a line around what they saw, and then we compared those lines with each other. So how big was yours in the same place? Did you even see one? And we ran that through to an algorithm and to process it up and make it into data and plot it out. And it turns out that the answer was pretty simple. The consistency of interpretation among observers increases with increasing resolution, both for optical on the bottom and for radar on the top. Both the consistency got to be very good, about 90% agreement in the area occupied by the time you got to the 1-meter resolution images. It's like, well, that's great, but there's one little hook on this. The radar images, they need to be taken. Somebody needs to pay for them to be taken, or we have to wait for that every 11 days. The European Space Agency satellite happens to come past. So it's not that frequent unless you pay for it. It can be very expensive. In our case, we have a special permit from the German version of NASA, the DLR, and they allow us to have images for if we're working on walrus surveys at walrus haulouts. They've given us a permit to collect that, and they charge us almost nothing for it. So that's nice, but radar has to be collected, and if you want it to be frequent, you have to pay for it. The optical ones are all readily available, but they only take an image. If they get an image, only 1 in 4 days is good. So there's just a lot of clouds in northern Alaska. So they have limited utility relative to radar. So that's good to know about the consistency and the nature of the imagery. To have a ground truth for our interpretation, we use the surveys. We have flown population estimate work in 2018 and 19. And here you see the area occupied by walruses at those 2 study sites in 2018 and 19. We can clearly see when they're there. When we bring in interpretations from satellite imagery, you can see the entire history of that haulout's use during the study years, 2018 and 2019. You can see that's much longer than what we knew about from the other surveys, and much less work, much less money to get data this way. We not only can get that when we've had people collecting data on the ground, but we also can get that when we have no field campaign. And when we're all hunkered down in 2020, satellites were still flying, and we were able to interpret that and have some understanding of where they were. And this can be used for management purposes. So if we know where the walruses are, that can be reported to local authorities who can talk with the barge operators to advise them on how to be careful. And the flight companies, community can say, oh, we'll choose this flight approach so we don't fly over walruses, and they can have that knowledge to better protect the walruses there. So if we want to extend that monitoring capability, then we'll need to put more people working on this. But now we have a method to do that. And if that becomes a priority, that's where our efforts will go. So not only was it useful for knowing what's going on in the season, but we wanted to go and extend this to other haulout sites. We were lucky working at Point Lay because it's very sandy and gravelly, and it's very easy to tell the walruses from the background. But many walrus haulouts have large boulders and cobbles, and it can be difficult to distinguish walruses from those, both in optical and radar. For that reason, we wanted to go to a site where we had those problems and see if we can still get the satellite imagery to function properly. Can we get good interpretation? We had worked in Northwestern Alaska at Point Lay, and we found a way to collaborate with a Russian partner who is working at Cape Schmidt doing standard monitoring procedures for his own management purposes and study purposes. He was able to give us some of his time, and we had the help of not only Anatoly Kochnev, but Dr. Irina Trukhanova to help coordinate the whole process of the collaboration. So even though we live on different sides of the Bering Strait, we're able to work together. In fact, there's an agreement between the two nations, the US-Russian agreement on cooperation in the field of environmental protection, ratified in 1994, and gives us the auspices to have direct communication between fellow scientists working on wildlife problems. We're very grateful for this. We don't have to go up through the State Department and down or do some secret handshake. This is just speaking to each other directly, scientist to scientist. I'm very grateful for that. It allows us to do studies. Without working across the Bering Straits, we can never get any studies done. Here you see our colleague, Dr. Kochnev, preparing to fly his surveys, and you can see the images he gets. Next to him, I've plotted one of the images of a beach with rocks and cobbles, something that would be difficult to distinguish in satellite imagery. We brought to the collaboration the collection of satellite imagery at the site, and you can see exactly the problem. Here's what he was able to see with his survey effort. You can see what we can see in the satellite imagery. It's going to be difficult to interpret. So our next step is to develop methods for interpretation. This can be done. It's done every day at USGS with the volcano observers who are using the same imagery to look for lava flows or just deformation of the earth due to the tectonic activity. So there are methods to work on that. I'm learning to use those methods right now, and I'm grateful for other scientists who give me guidance on that. So this is what we're trying to see here. So what use is the monitoring by satellite? The main thing is we're able to provide near real-time management information and let people know, oh, take that different approach to not fly over them, or for the aviators, and the same thing for mariners. That can be provided to authorities, and they can make advice to people. It can also be used to support the haulout-based population estimates we were working on before. Without knowing that the haulouts you're studying for making those population estimates are the primary haulouts, you can't make any real conclusions from the work you do. So we were lucky when we did our previous surveys in 2018, we had aerial surveys to confirm that the haulout we were surveying was the primary one. Now with satellite imagery, we can use that instead, and it's easier to do, especially in remote areas, northern Chukotka, where monitoring is difficult to achieve. So that's the next. There's two things that we worked on right now. In the future, we hope to automate this so that we have a quicker workflow and delivery of information to people who need it. And we also hope to be able to actually do some estimates of the number of walruses directly from satellites in orbit. So that's going to take a few steps to understand how to get that to work, or maybe not be possible. So we have to evaluate that. And the last part of my talk, I think there'll be plenty of time for questions, is about how we want to use imagery from above, flown from a drone, to actually answer the age-old question, like, how are those walruses doing? Are they getting kind of skinny? Are they getting fatter? Are they looking healthy? Traditionally, people do those sorts of measurements with an animal in hand. It's not something we're going to do with walruses. We do know that from previous work we've done that we're expecting the loss of sea ice to continue. It's forecast to continue. We can use those models of what will happen to sea ice with different scenarios for how our society will develop and respond to global warming. Those scenarios are well understood by physicists and teams around the globe, build their own models, and then we gather all those models together, take the ones that best describe how sea ice has behaved in the historical period, choose those ones and use those to forecast sea ice in the coming century. We know that loss of sea ice results in the female walruses having to come to shore and to rest on shore. And the consequences of this is that it costs more for those female walruses to make a living. They're going to have more energy. They're going to have to eat more. Maybe that's something they can do. And we don't know that. We don't know what their capabilities are. So it may affect them, or they may be something within a walrus's capability to just bring in more energy and make a better living that way. So to evaluate that, we need some way to measure body condition and answer that age-old question: are they doing better, or looking healthy, or really getting chunky? So to do that, we can't handle walruses directly. Capturing walruses is just not something we're going to do for a study like this. But you can get that information without even touching the walrus by using photos. Here's a calf that we imaged some time ago near the community of Wainwright, 2008. And just by having that scale object in there, we can build a photographic model of this walrus and stretch out a line on it and measure it and get those measurements. So our next step is to go to captive walruses, where we can get these measurements and then take the images and then learn from the images how to validate that, how to calibrate the actual measurement to what you get from the image. So we'll be visiting all the zoos we can get to North America, and we may have to somehow work with zoos in other countries as well to get a large enough sample size and calibrate the system. Once the system works, it would be flown with a drone, just like we did for the population estimate work, or the same that people do in northern Chilcotka for monitoring efforts. Same sort of drone, but we would zoom in with a better camera and a better drone, stay at a high altitude and be able to measure the walruses. This is just a conceptual depiction of that with images we collected before. So with that, we hope to be able to have a way that we can monitor the body condition, measure hundreds and hundreds of walruses every fall when they come to shore, wherever they're accessible, and be able to ask the question, how are they doing? Are they doing better or worse? And we hope that that information can help people who care about walruses. I think that's everything I have for slides. I want to thank all the people in the communities that have helped us with these studies, both in person in Alaska, as well as people help collect the aerospace images. Appreciate you coming to the talk tonight. Look forward to your questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tony. Honestly, I'm sort of agog. You're getting so close to the holy grail of getting the numbers. You've cracked the population estimate.
I'm excited about that because I know it can be repeated at other sites, and the cost of doing that is low. It's not for me to decide that that's the best way. There are other ways that we can get at population estimates. I know that Fish and Wildlife Service is pushing hard on a population mark recapture study using genetic marks. I'm not directly involved with that study, but to learn more about that, we have to turn to them.
All right, so we will have questions, and while we're going to the questions, I want to thank Tony again. It's never easy to be a speaker, honestly, and he just pulled that off like not a problem under the threat of the whole thing may collapse and he'd have to host the whole himself. So So what we do here is we ask that the speakers chime in. Straight Science audience is always good about tossing the speaker some love. So put a little love in there for Chad. It's not easy, like I say, to be a speaker. So before we go to the chat box or the people that are online, I want to check in with the callers. We still have callers on the line. Do the callers have any question or comment regarding, for Tony, regarding the walrus presentation? Give people a minute to undo.
There are some questions in the chat. Can I
Yes.
address those?
No,
So
I'm just going to give her, no, wait, let me just give the callers a second, because sometimes with the way things are, you may have dropped your phone. So.
And Gay, they might need to unmute themselves, which is a little harder on a phone. It's either *6 or *7.
I think it's *6.
I think.
Yeah, and I could just do this, ask to unmute. So, all right. So anyway, the callers at any time, or if your caller's having trouble getting through, you can text my cell phone at 907-434-1149. 434-1149. So yes, there are, let's go to the chat box. Oh, and actually, well, we already had a question that was preloaded from Savunga had a question.
Oh,
and we'll get to that. So
sorry,
first,
start with that one.
Okay, well, the question that was before the talk, because Savunga figured they would not be able to get on tonight. The
Yeah.
question was from Savunga, and it was, what percentage of the haulout is being determined to be out feeding? And so I guess my assumption would be then, if you're making these counts and you're counting from satellites, you can see what walrus you can see on the beach, but how many are you missing that may be doing their other business at sea, like feeding and swimming and so forth? How do you account for that?
So I just put can you see the plot that I put into the chat here?
Yes, we
so
can.
there are two things on this plot, and I'll describe it in detail. So I talked about how we've measured the number of walruses that are resting on shore that are dry. Those we counted directly in the photos. The proportion that are not available to be counted, but are still part of that group of walruses moving around in the U.S. waters, the Chukchi Sea, those walruses, we've estimated the proportion that were wet and not available to be counted by putting a radio on their back, held on to them. That's during the period of the survey. We had reports back from each of those on an hourly basis. And in this plot, you can see a red line that represents the portion of those tagged walruses that were dry during the survey. So you can see how it changes quite a bit. Part of that is because it's a small sample size. We're only able to put out 30 tags. They're expensive to put out, and we don't want to handle more walruses than we have to.
So Tony, just for my brain, so as it goes up, you have more of your tagged animals are hauled out dry, and that's the red line. Okay,
that's the red line. The proportion that were wet is the red line. The blue dots, that's the number we counted on the beach. Now this all gets put into an analysis to estimate we give this to our biometrician. She does biometrician magic and thinks of every possible way there could be bias in what we're doing, and she comes up with an estimate using defensible statistical theory with lots of equations that I don't understand, but the concept is simple, is that she regresses the number of walruses in that area. I'll go back to that plot, and estimates that through the use of those radio tags, a proportion that are hauled out and available for counting. And
so that's live. I mean, you actually, at the same time you're doing the survey, you have these tagged animals telling you.
At the same time. So we have to put radios on first, wait for 3 or 4 days for everybody to mix together, and then we start surveying.
Well done. That's interesting. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off. Is that the end of your?
Yes. Does that fairly answer that question?
It does to me, but the person will be listening later to the recording, so hopefully that covers it. And then in the chat box, have you begun to use AI, artificial intelligence, to do the counts of individuals?
Not yet. We looked closely at that. We were so hopeful. And then we realized, no, it wasn't ready. In order to get the AI to work, we had to first teach a computer what it means to count walruses. So we had to spend 3.5 months in front of a screen putting red dots on it. So now that we've done that, that can be fed into a computer algorithm and consider the possibility of counting them that way. But it's its own project in its own right. I hope we can get that done before we get our next surveys going.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you about when's the next big survey effort?
There's many thoughts about that. Right now, the main funding is being set aside for estimating population is with Fish and Wildlife Service, and they're pushing towards this genetic marker capture, which would be an offshore survey method. May be very successful. They're in the process of having it evaluated, and I can't speak to it. That's another topic. So the short of it is there are other research priorities right now, evaluating that fully, and then we'll come back to this one. Even if it's not used for a whole population estimate, it still may be very useful for regional population and monitoring.
Thank you. That's helpful. Peter Lowy with Gnome Nugget has a question, has his hand raised. We'll switch back person to chat. So go ahead, Peter, ask your question.
That was really, really fascinating. Thanks so much. I had a question about something you said about the disturbances and how data can be used in relative real time to speak with barge operators or planes to kind of alter the routes. One of the previous Strait Sciences had these graphs on the increased sounds, the increased kind of noise pollution in the Bering Strait. And obviously that's going to cause a lot of stress on marine mammals. And so I'm wondering, obviously the ability to change barge or plane routes could be hugely important. Basically the question is, how reliably can you get this done? How can it be institutionalized? Are there opportunities to work cross-border on that? Because there are no US ships going up and down the straits right now. There are only Russian ships. Can't, without bombarding you with questions, sorry, just in this vein, can the science cooperation be used to encourage Russian ships to not take such a route?
There's several parts to your question. So I'll first come back to the part we asked about. You raised the concern that vessel noise in the water may result in stampedes on shore. I don't believe that will happen. So the vessel noise in water is a concern for the animals when they're in the water. When the walruses are on shore, resting on shore, they can respond to sighting vessels or smelling vessels, but they're less likely to be responding to the propeller wash and engine noise that are in the water. How walruses respond when they are in the water to vessel presence is the subject of a study we have going on. We're trying to tease out a signal of whether walruses are responding or not to vessel proximity using the tracking data we've collected for other studies. At present, the resolution is not so good. Our tracking data is the walrus transmitters. They're only accurate within 5 kilometers for location. They're accurate precisely for the diary of being in and out of the water, but not for location. So we can't determine the walrus's location very closely, very precisely to the ship location. We have the ship location precisely from tracking of ships, but we're not seeing enough clarity to give an answer of how walruses respond. It appears they're not responding at distances beyond a dozen or so kilometers. So that's pretty far away, so it's not a big surprise. But it's more the concern of ship noise near them. The other big concern with ships is the spill concerns. So that's why we want to have near time monitoring capabilities. We can advise spill responders, or even if there's a way to divert vessels that are coming close to shore, so they're further offshore. It doesn't cost barge operators that much more to do that. In terms of how that gets regulated in the US or how it gets regulated in Russia internationally, that's not my specialty. I do know we provide information to Fish and Wildlife Service. They can have conversations with the barge operator and say, could you idle your barge over this way instead of that way? And that
The
can
US operator.
US operators next to US haulouts. But in terms of international, that's a question for the Coast Guard or beyond.
Got it. Thanks very much.
All right. So can you use, in the chat box, can you use the satellite imagery to determine if more walruses are hauling out on land now compared to when there was more ice?
No, I mean, the satellite imagery only goes back, the useful satellite imagery really goes back until 2017. We do have Landsat imagery going back beyond that, but it's pretty fuzzy and it only is useful for very large aggregations. It would be worth looking back to 2007 when we first had them there and see if we can make it out in Landsat 8, but it's not a very well resolved, it's not a very clear picture. So it's of limited utility. It may be worth doing there at that haulout, but in terms of how walruses are they spending more time on land? Yes, when in the Chukchi Sea, when those females don't have ice to rest on, they are coming to shore in large numbers and resting there. It seems to be about a week or so after the last ice goes away that they all show up on shore.
And so you got a comment from Michelle Kissling, and I have to say I agree with the sentiment. She said, really neat stuff. Thanks, Tony. I like seeing the use of non-invasive sampling, except for the tagging, and a method that is comparable in both US and Russia. Super. And I agree. It is super that you're able to, your team, to see the Bering Strait region sort of come together and be able to compare data and share data, because we're sharing everything. And we just have that line, and we know we have to live with that, but the animals are so transboundary, so and so important. So do the walruses have seasonal movements that would be affecting how many are at these locations?
Yeah. I mean, it's if I go back to this slide here, that we do have an understanding of their seasonal movement relative to the sea ice minimum in the Chukchi Sea. It's limited in that we know about it only from the tags we put on. We put them on at sea. They'll stay on a walrus for 2 months before they come off. So we get better resolution on following an individual throughout the season. And from that, you can see this is one of 4 patterns of movement. We just depicted, this is the pattern that results in walruses coming to shore northwestern Alaska. So, but there's another 3 other patterns that involve movement off on the Russian side. There's one that comes up and goes over the top and over towards Wrangel Island, and another one that just comes along northern Chukotka and occupies the waters near Wrangel Island. And there's another one that's mostly on the eastern side. So there's a number of patterns that come out of their movements at that scale. Is that the sort of scale you were asking about?
And I would just add, Tony, could you give us a time scale for what you're talking about as those movements from?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So
that's okay. It's just
the color of the dots is depicts the minimum ice day. So yellow becomes the minimum ice day. Green is before the minimum ice, and then yellow is at the minimum ice day of the year, and then red is long after it. So that it gives you some sense. This is so that the green ones start down here in the bottom in early mid-June. They're up here late June through July, August, into September even, depending on the minimum ice day. And then shortly after that, they'll come to shore and rest here on shore and then occupy that in this region for some time before they begin a slow movement over to the Russian side and occupying the Chukokan haulouts and waters.
And then for the person who asked the question, of course, as the winter comes and the ice pushes down into the Bering Sea, the walruses will be, for the most part, following that front as it comes down.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tom. I see there's a comment from Rick Toman. It's so nice to see collaborative work across Alaska and Chukotka. Truly a Bering Strait goodness happening, and seeing that is really, I agree. Also, Rick Toman is on, and he said he might be able to give us a little bit of a weather update for those in Nome that are on when we're done with the questions. If you're still on, Rick, I think people in Nome would be grateful, especially since they don't have the internet. People can call their friends. Okay, question. You mentioned that there is now an opportunity for Northern Chukotka scientists to adopt your methodology from the 2018-2019 walrus count in Point Lay in an effort to generate a larger estimate for the Chukchi Sea region. Have they, the Russians, expressed interest in wanting to adopt this methodology, and would that effort fall under the 1994 US-Russia Agreement on Cooperation in the Field of Environmental Protection?
Maybe I should have another Northern Chukokan biologist respond to this. Irina or Alexei or Anatoly. Anatoly can't make it in. He's in Chukotka now, where the bandwidth is about that big. But you know, the short answer is that they have been flying drone surveys since 2017. We collaborated with them on that to help develop the methodology. They have done an awesome job of that. And in fact, we're now comparing, with the help of Alexei Altikov, we're comparing the processing methods that we use in the US with the Russian ones and coming up with ways to archive the data so we can understand the same workflows. So when we talk about the possibility of doing joint efforts to estimate the population in the Chukchi Sea, we have a common language that we're using. The really beautiful thing is that when he ran the analyses of how they had been processing and how we process it, the answer came out identical. And we've been able to find some funding to help ensure that the data they've collected gets archived and made publicly available for further study. So that lays the groundwork for us to be able to work together and have those conversations. And I believe it is covered under this agreement between the United States and Russia on the area of the field of environmental protection. I'm not a policy person, but I would move forward understanding that it is, and until somebody disagrees.
And that go ahead. There's somebody on. I can't see. Sounds like they're unmuted. Is there any question from the caller? That reminded me to ask. Any caller? You see that you're still on. There's at least one caller still on. Holding in, listening. Well done. If you don't have a question, please stay on the line though, and ask at any time, because you have the priority. And for that question, I think that you're able to work under that agreement, that 1994.
I believe we are.
Russian, yeah. So
I know that
also
the spirit is there, and I believe the law is on our side to be able to work together. The spirit is there from both sides of the Bering Strait, where we all believe that we need to understand walruses, and we can only understand it by working together.
It's such a great Bering Strait story. Thank you. All right, and another question in the chat. You okay, Tony, with all these questions hanging in? Okay. Is there any evidence of prey depletion near the land haulouts?
Yes. This is a question for Jackie and Lee, and maybe they can step in to address that. I think it's a very interesting question. And there may be some evidence, we haven't fully examined this, but we see some evidence when they first started coming to shore in northern Chukotka, they would forage in small loops, 5 miles from shore. And over the years, it seemed that the size of those foraging loops became larger, suggesting that there may be some depletion of prey. But the data was a very small sample size, and it's kind of more of an anecdote than data at that point.
Yeah, this is Jackie. I would say that, we are seeing declines in some of those in the southern part of the Chukchi Sea. And, even in the north, but the near shore, we have very limited data in the less than 20 meters.
Mhm.
And I think the data, what's surprising is that Jim Laverne, when we did that work there, the biomass of these clams and other species is so much lower in the nearshore zone, but that's where they're feeding. So they oftentimes go offshore to feed on those higher bivalve biomass. So I don't have an answer for you on the exact haul out areas, but we are seeing declines in some real key prey species across the northern Bering and Chukchi.
But they do like to go to Hannah Shoal.
Yeah,
I
they
mean, Jackie was just showing me a new plot that map with hotspot in Hannah Shoal and the stuff near shore at Point Lay. At least the data that we have is there isn't much food there for them.
Yeah. And Hannah Shoal being the southeast side, you know, that area. just under
Northeast.
Hannah Shoal.
Yeah.
Northeast. Yeah.
Well, southeast part of Hannah Shoal.
Hannah Shoal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Press it there.
Yeah.
Huh. And there is an interesting behavior pattern we see for trips from Point Lay. We see them going out. There's three things they do. They kind of mill around locally, then go to Hannah Shoal. Those are longer trips and they're harder to capture as the tags wear out and fall off. But we see those very clearly. But then we also have a behavior going over Ledyard Bay. And it'd be interesting just to go to that spot and sample that spot and see what's going on.
Comment on the polychaetes there if they like those.
Yeah, well, I would just add that we have a lot of polychaetes up in certain areas, and as Gay knows, these walruses will eat polychaetes and sipunculids and other worm-like creatures, and
Quite a bit.
they're in high biomass, so it's not just clams. So you know, these animals are going for big patches of food.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was a walrus I know that had at least a kilo of polychaetes in its stomach, and at the rate those digest, that was a very quickly caught walrus, and it let you know that it doesn't take long for those to go down, and walrus can knock off quite a bit of worms if they get into them.
Yeah.
It's not all about clams.
Right.
There is a comment in the chat. Abundant estimates are a vital piece of information to understand walrus population dynamics.
Oh.
Survival and reproduction rates are also important pieces to the puzzle.
Mhm.
More of a comment, but anything you want to
Yeah.
address there?
And that's something, maybe Bill, can you pop in and speak to that a bit more? So, and I didn't get to that, I mentioned with the cruises that are seeking to use genetic marker capture to estimate the number of walruses. During those same cruises, USGS is planning to collect additional cow-calf ratio data, and that will be that has proven to be very beneficial in estimating the trajectory of the population. And I believe Bill can speak to that better than I can. Bill, do you want to jump in on that one?
No, Tony, that's all I was going to mention is that those age structure surveys are crucial for getting that survival rate.
And it's
Thank you very much.
been almost 5 years since the last one, so we're looking at repeating that in 2023 is my understanding.
And another question, are the Round Island walrus, and Round Island, for those who don't know, is in Bristol Bay on the US side, a separate down in northeast of the Aleutians?
Get some map here.
Okay. Are the Round Island walrus a separate stock from the Chukchi Sea?
It's a great question. And this was, so we've done some genetic examination of Pacific walrus. And we used to think, well, there's 3 different breeding areas. There's one down in Bristol Bay. The males and females gather together down here in Bristol Bay, from Nunivak Island down to Round Island. In this region, a plinia that forms there, where water gets pulled, the ice gets pulled away, and that walrus is there in this mixed ice environment, even when the ice is further south. That the largest plinia is over here by Sivukak, south of there. The ice gets pulled away by those northeastern winds. The walruses occupy this very rich area, and there's large numbers there. Similar thing happens over here in Gulf of Nadir. So there's 3 different breeding areas. We always wondered, well, is there some genetic separation? Is there some sort of stock separation? We have looked at teeth, isotopes in teeth, to see if there's any signature of separation. The answer was not really. And then we looked at genetics, and to see if there's some separation among those 3 breeding areas, and the answer was no. They're Pacific walruses. They're
All the
all
same.
one group. Now the animals you see down here in the summer that are holing out there are almost all males. This is where the males are occupying the open water area. They rest on shore. They can get some rest at sea using their pharyngeal pouches.
All right. And then I guess to add to the comments about the ship traffic. So number one, welcome to the Russian people that are on this call. Our neighbors are on. And so I don't know where you're calling from. I know some Volodya's in Seattle and some are new names to me. And I'm so excited and welcome you all. Thank you for attending this. And we are watching currently, I'm calling in from Nome, Alaska, and we watch in awe right now at the industrial ship traffic that Russia is able to have command of the Chukchi and Bering Seas in February. It's stunning. Some of the concerns, and it's not just focused at Russian industrial traffic, but Russia has the advantage right now, has a lot going on their side to us because we don't have any. But as we see fisheries coming north, further and further on both sides of the line, doesn't matter. And as we see industrial ship traffic in the Bering Strait on both sides increasing. I know that some of the concerns that have come up have included recently, we've seen video footage of bycatch of walrus in pollock trawls in the late fall as the ice and the fisheries are really starting to be right next door to each other. And we also have, there's much thought, we have never seen the big ship traffic come through the region, at least that we're aware of, in March and April, and very little in May. My understanding is that that may occur starting, if not this year, I think there's an estimated start to it in either 23 or 24, that we should anticipate absolutely year-round traffic. And one of the other things that comes with that, along with sound and just the disturbance of being close, I think. But 2 things that have been brought to my attention by others has been, what will we do with ship strikes? Because these vessels are capable of terrific speeds through the ice. We were watching Arctica, the newest, largest icebreaker was just in the Chukchi, cruising at 17 knots through the ice of the Chukchi Sea. And that was impressive. But there also is a concern about, in springtime with pregnant walrus up on an ice floe in number, that sort of thing, that we'll all have to sort of see how it goes. But those are things that in your research or your concerns as you move forward, ship strikes, bycatch, sound, that sort of thing, and debris. We had a foreign marine debris event. So those are just things to add to your, maybe your concerns about ship traffic. Those have been brought up recently. And also, as far as depletion near haulouts, know that there's still, people are harvesting walrus and getting large clams in the stomach in the Bering Strait region. So we love to hear that. And it doesn't sound like there hasn't been recently any concern about what's been seen in the stomachs.
That's great.
So that's been nice to hear. With that, any other questions? All right.
Let me
And
put this
again,
I'll put a website here in the chat if that's okay.
All right.
About speaking about the vessel traffic. Here's a handy way to monitor that. Let's see, how do I get to the chat again?
it's at the bottom of your screen in a little cartoon bubble. If you move your mouse around, it'll pop up.
I'll just drop this here. I just learned about this today. It's from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It's an agency that's responsible for providing geospatial intelligence to the spy agencies the United States has.
Well, I'm sure if we all join, they'll be really suspicious about straight science. They'll say, how'd you get this number?
Oops. Oh, yeah. Did I get this right? To everyone. I've only sent it to one person.
You in the left hand of the
Okay,
chat
let me
box,
try again. Did that come
it
through?
can say, yes, it did. It came to
Okay.
everyone.
So this This is it's just an open map that's available. Basically, it summarizes vessel traffic on various timescales
Awesome.
nationwide. I just learned about it today, and I was
Yeah.
able to make some of the maps in the talk today. But I thought it was very
Cool.
interesting just to give a person perspective. You can go back in time, I think, to 2012, and look at vessel traffic. It puts the power of all that data in the hands of anybody who wants to look at it. Because before,
Wonderful.
working with this data was very difficult. And Jackie and Lee, I think, are pretty well aware of that. Bill's very aware of it too. Now this is just simply if you want to see who's going through over any given time period, you can pull this up, and there's easy controls to make your own map and understand.
Is
what's
that
going on.
is that updated through today? This one
I
that we're
believe
seeing on.
so this just does a time period summary. It's nice because there's a lot of other resources online let you see individual ships. You can click on them and learn about them, but this lets you see the actual paths and over a time period. And you might want to know, like, well, what's been going on in the last week, or how does that compare to what happened the same week, say 3-4 years ago? Now you can ask that question as anybody with a computer can ask that question and begin to understand what is going on with vessel traffic, and from there you can form your concerns.
Wonderful.
The data in your
Wonderful. That's new to me, and I'm sure new to a lot of people. And thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that'll get a lot of hits here very soon. And so when the FBI shows up, we'll just say Tony Fischback. Is that what we do?
This is an open website produced for anybody to use.
Oh, wonderful. So no worries there, everybody. Just
No worries
use
there,
it.
yeah.
No, they usually go after the sponsor day.
Yeah, that'll be, that's right. Gnome.
Hmm.
So, Tony, do you have anything you want to ask us?
So one thing that I'm really wanting to address is to get a better understanding of which haulouts deserve the most monitoring. If we have only so much effort to put out there to monitor haulouts for concerns about disturbance or vessel traffic, it'd be interesting to know if people are concerned about, say, a haulout on Diomede over by Plymouth Island, or should be, so those are, and that's sort of guidance that would be good to have from the community. And of course, we take our direction from the Fish and Wildlife Service. They're the management authority. If they express an interest in a specific area need be monitored, we can put our resources into that. So that can be expressed to Fish and Wildlife Service, or let me know and we can have that conversation. It's good to get that direction from people.
One thing, and anyone can speak up at any time.
There was a
Especially those
note
callers.
from Linda Shaw indicating that we should contact tourism companies that are engaged in Arctic voyages to discuss wildlife viewing practices, and this is a really good idea. And this is what the Fish and Wildlife Service does. In part, the large haulout in Northwest Alaska is protected and so successful because the people of Point Lay are very concerned about the walruses there. They put tremendous effort into ensuring that it doesn't become a big tourist thing, that there aren't people there constantly bothering these walruses. The mayor we've been working with at the Native Village and Warren Harding Lampy have played a tremendous role in ensuring these walruses just are not being overrun by tourist companies. There could be people flying in there with clients like other walrus haulouts, and people would like to see that. Many people really care about it and want to see it in person, but the damage, you can do damage to the walrus haulout by scaring these walruses coming by with aircraft or approaching with drones. It's happened. So management agency, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the local authorities, local residents done a lot to protect that haulout. So it's a good point to reach out to those engaged with tourism to have that well managed.
And another haulout that you might want to think about is when, and maybe the Russian biologists on the call, so often during the summer, Little Diomede can look over on the southern end of Big Diomede, Rachmaninoff, and see quite a large number of walrus hauled out. It'll turn orange. And you do have, I believe the Border Patrol is still there on the north side of the island. And so maybe there's some way to communicate or engage the military. I'm sure having an excuse to go to the south side of Big Diomede and count walrus would probably be welcome from whatever else is on the schedule. during
Uh-huh.
the summer. It might be
Huh.
nice. So I didn't know if that's also another way that is not usually on the maps, but
Uh-huh.
it is a place where walruses do haul out.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's two dots in the center of the, I wonder if it's, yeah, yeah, we could know more about that.
Just since there are Russian military there, they might be able to go take a look,
Yeah.
get a count,
Yeah.
fly a drone, whatever they've got.
Mhm.
And with that, it looks like we're out of questions. I mean, I have tons, but I don't think we're at the hour for everybody to go home. Now, Rick Toman, I don't know if you're still on, but do you want to give Nome a little weather update? We really appreciate everybody coming from far away and know that this is a little unusual, but we've lost a lot of internet in Nome, and we've been having quite a day for Nome, quite a few days by Nome standards of things breaking and having to be shut down. So a weather update would be a great relief.
Yeah, thanks, Gay, and hope everyone in Western Alaska staying safe here. Yeah, it has been an incredibly windy start to February with big high pressure up across the North Slope and through the interior and low pressure in the southern Bering Sea. That's not uncommon. What, of course, is uncommon is we've had that pattern hardly changed at all in the last 3 days. So just screaming winds with mostly sunny skies or just some high thin clouds across the Seward Peninsula. Winds topping out in excess of 70 miles an hour for most of the afternoon at Unacleat. But for once, I get to be the bearer of good news. Winds are on the way down. Just since Tony started his presentation, the winds have really tailed off at Unacleat. Winds were still gusting to near 60 at Gullivan at 3 o'clock, and they are now sustained under 10 miles an hour. So not going to be calm anytime soon, but I think everywhere at this point, the strongest winds have passed. And as we're seeing in a number of places, winds will probably drop down, not calm, but much lower than they were quite quickly. So there you go.
And I just have one last thank you very much, Rick. That's great news for everybody. Know that we have several Russian biologists on the line, and they may be, and I don't mean to tax you, but if you have any ice knowledge in the Bering Strait region, I think people, especially calling in on a walrus talk, would really welcome any sort of news on ice from this event.
You bet.
It might mean something.
So as folks have posted on the Facebook page today, and we're seeing in satellite picture, these strong winds have really moved ice around quite a bit. Little hard to tell on the satellite imagery because it's interspersed with those high clouds, but clearly, especially the thicker ice has really gotten pushed around. Yesterday, we could actually, the ice flows were moving so fast between St. Lawrence Island and Chukotka. You could actually see them moving on the satellite loops. So a lot of ice has been moved around, and that water, the open water will refreeze. But of course, we're starting from scratch now. Now, when the winds change, we'll get some of that blown back. But certainly a very mobile situation at the moment, and very different than the ice looked in the northern Bering Sea just 5 days ago.
And can I put your Facebook site on the chat box?
Yes,
So
please.
All right, so here we go. If you guys are any good at Facebook, Google up, or don't Google, go to Facebook and type in Seward Peninsula / and all the spacing is important. Seward Peninsula, no space, / no space, Bering Strait weather and climate info. And you'll see what goes on. And it's a wonderful place. And Rick's done a tremendous job of providing information to our Western Alaska, especially in the Bering Strait region. And I think on both sides of the Bering Strait would be really interested. There's a lot of good satellite imagery, local knowledge, and a lot of people turn to this now as a really good resource. So thank you. Let's see, there's a couple of text messages coming in. Hang on one sec. Oh, people are sorry they couldn't join in on the Zoom. And I don't know.
Clearly, I need to
And-
come up and visit.
Yes, you do. Okay, and people just wanting to know, is there going to be a recording available, which there will be. So with that, again, Tony, can we get you back with some of the, I don't know what the work is. It sounds like there's work going on for the US Fish and Wildlife Service regarding the mark recapture work that they're doing with skin biopsies. So we'll have to see if we
Yeah,
can
I
get
think
those guys.
maybe interesting
give us an
talk to
update.
bring in Bill Beatty, who has been in the center of that, and he's now back working with USGS on this, and he'll be helping working with these unified analyses of how to bring in the cow-calf ratio observations and the mark recapture into a unified analysis. It's so complex, so I can't begin to think about it. Bill can, and he's excellent at explaining things. So it would be good to
All right,
have
Bill,
him.
you're on the spot. I'll be calling.
Then Rebecca Taylor, our biometrician, is leading that effort. But he's kind of on the biology side, working with the problems.
So we'd like to get you back as well when you've got more to say on any of these. I mean, it's just fantastic what you guys have been able to do. And the fact that you are collaborative with our neighbor is wonderful. And we would welcome that. So
Great. Well, thank you, Gay. And
With
thank
that,
you
thank-
for participating.
thank you all. Next week, we have the day is maybe up in the air, but there is the Alaska Department of Fish and Game has a Alaska hare tagging study in Nome. So if you want to know the hippity hop wonders of Alaska hares, and it's going to be pretty interesting because hares, Alaska hares, or the jackrabbits of the north, are transboundary in this region. Truly. So with that, thank you all for coming. Tony, if you want to stay on, that'd be great for a second.
Mhm.
And Rick, I just want to say, Rick Toman spoke, and I lifted my earphones. It's still windy, but it isn't what it was. Rick, like oil on the water, it always does it. So thank you so much for giving us an update.